Welcome, everyone, to the April meeting of the New York City Transit Authority, its subsidiary MABSTOA, and its sister authority, Staten Island Rapid Transit Operating Authority, all of which we boiled down into the Transit Committee. Are there public speakers?
We have one public speaker, Mr. Chair. That would be Murray Bowden.
For you, those of you who don't know, I was not scheduled to be here today. I was scheduled to be hiking in Switzerland at this time. 2 weeks ago, they took a chunk out of my shin. I have an open wound, and I will be as long as 6 months before it heals. So I'm not in a very good mood today because I'm stuck here. One of the things that happened at the last meeting was that one of the people back there spoke and they didn't have a wireless mic, and I could not hear them over there, and when I went to walk over here, a detective stopped me and said I couldn't walk to a place where I could hear. If in fact you want the public to participate, and had I not been here and had to look at this on the internet, the comments by the speaker would not have been there for the record. This is about cultural change, people. And I will use first names where I can, just to make the point that the world has changed. You can't do it the way you've done it before. The prime example about changing and do it right is that tag team sitting up on the front there, Tom and Carmine tag. I call them tag team because they're doing it right. Now, how do we extend what you've learned how to do to everybody else? You've changed the system. You're cleaning it up, and yes, there are people who are being impacted negatively by it. There's always going to be that. You can't make an omelet without cracking the eggs. And some of the people who are on the board that sit around here and ask questions that should have been sent by email does nothing more than disrupt the meeting and make it run too long. So there are two problems. How to get some of the operating staff to respond correctly, and how to get the board to shut up when they belong to shut up. So I will be here for 5 meetings today, and I will make it well known to the board, and at Wednesday morning I will be here. If you have a question that belongs in an
Bowden,
email,
would you please sum up?
Send it in an email. If not, don't waste everybody's time by asking a question that didn't belong in a meeting.
Thank you.
The minutes of the March meeting are in the book. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve them. All in favor of approving the minutes? Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Are there any changes to the work plan?
Mr. Chairman, there's a proposed change to the work plan at the request of the chairman of the MTA.
Good heavens.
The request is to provide quarterly reports on EEO and diversity among the workforce. And we would propose to have the first report at the May meeting, and then we would proceed quarterly going forward.
All right. Does anybody oppose this change to the work plan? If not, all in favor? Any opposed? The work plan is so amended. I would like to acknowledge the presence of our wonderful Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, Joe Loda. Thank you for joining us. It's also now my pleasure to recognize the Operating Commander-in-Chief of our wonderful, hardworking, and dedicated staff, Tom Prendergast. How did we do last month?
Pretty good month. Operations report, subway performance, Carmen Bianco.
Good morning. Subway performance results for the month of February and the 12-month average were appropriate are as follows. Concerning weight assessment, the 12-month rolling average for weight assessment, subway weight assessment, was 79.1 in February of 12. That represents an improvement of 0.3% from where we were in February of 2011, which was at 78.8. On-time performance, terminal on-time performance for February was as follows. System weekday OTP was at 85.3. That's an improvement of 0.8% from February of 11. System-wide weekend OTP was at 87.2. That's an increase of 0.3% from 86.9 in February of 11. If you notice in the books, one of the things that we've seen an improvement in is that on the 7 line. 7 line improvement has gone up 7.3%. I think that's largely because of the comprehensive track and signal rehab work that's been performed there. Moving on to mean distance between failure, we've had an increase in the month of February at 192,054 miles. It was up 1.8% from 188,717 in February of 11. The 12-month average was 171,588. That's relatively unchanged from 171,746 for the preceding 12 months. Key performance indicators, system-wide service KPI was 83.1. That's up a half point from 82.6 in February of 11. Passenger environment survey KPI was at 90.9. It's down 0.9% from 91.8 in February of 11. For Staten Island, their service KPI was not reported. However, their PES score was 86%, down 2.6 from 88.6 in February of 11. Moving on to just to note Fast Track, we've now completed our 5th installation of Fast Track on Friday, April 13th, and again on the 7th Avenue line. And again, the results that we're seeing are much the same as we have all along. We are getting an amazing amount of work accomplished. It's done in a very safe manner. The employees are able to work out there without having to clear up for trains every few minutes. So we are very, very encouraged by the results. And as a matter of fact, I'll point out one situation. If you recall, early in April, we had a water main break right at Chambers Street, and it's an area where the water tends to build up. And in this case, that we had already gone through Fast Track, and all those drains were cleaned previous to that event, and that water receded just at a quick speed. And most of our operating managers were that's pretty amazing how fast we were able to clear that incident and get it back up and running. So tonight we start Fast Track on the 8th Avenue line between 59th Street and J Street. That concludes the operations report.
Didn't see you all the way down there. You should move up, you know.
Microphone.
Question that I've asked previously. Do you now know, or will you know at some point in time, the extent to which Fast Track will minimize or eliminate to some degree the delays in travel during the course of the day that occur by reason of either the gangs or any other right-of-way work? If you have that information now, I'd like to know it. If you don't, I think it's something that we need to know, because it was a justification for Fast Track.
Well, I think the answer is that we're pretty early on with this. We've not had we've only gone through one cycle at this point. And, we are making a tremendous amount of repairs, doing a tremendous amount of maintenance and inspection. So I think the longer-term answer is going to be yes, we will see that, but it's still too early to have that info at this point.
Thank you. Any further questions? Andrew?
I'd like to thank Tom and Carmen for, at this last Fast Track on the 123, putting a dedicated shuttle bus for the folks on the Upper Lenox line, which didn't happen last time. Those folks, for years had no service, and at least during Fast Track, you're giving them a dedicated shuttle bus. I think a shuttle train would have been better. I know there's a cost issue with that, but
It's not the cost issue. It's the ability to actually operate that shuttle, and we can show you in detail. It really can't be done in a reliable manner.
even though it was done for over 20 years?
Right now, with the signal interlocking we have up there and the safety rules we have in place, it is totally different today than it was 20 years ago.
All right, Cheryl Kennedy for safety.
Okay, the safety results were as follows. The subway customer accident rate decreased by 8.4% for the 12-month period. In the month of January, the accident rate decreased by 23.8%, moving to 2.78 per million subway customers from a rate of 3.65 last year. The employee lost time accident rate decreased 15.8% for the month of February 2012 versus February 2011. The rolling 12-month rate also decreased by 2.1% over the previous 12-month period. There were 75 confirmed fires for the month of February, down 22.7% from the previous year. Additionally, fires decreased over the last 12 months by 11.8%. All but one of the 75 fires were categorized as being low or average in severity for the month of February.
Thank you, Cheryl. Any questions for Cheryl? If not, we are ready for New York City Police Department Transit Bureau Chief Joseph Fox in full regalia. Joe.
Thank you, Mr. LeBeau. Hello, all. Today I'm happy to report a reduction in subway crime during the month of March. That's a promising indicator that our enforcement efforts and strategies are yielding positive results. For the month of March, the Transit Bureau experienced a decrease of 1.5% in total index felonies, 192 versus 195, decrease of 3 crimes. The daily average was 6.2 crimes for the month of March compared to February's daily average of 8 and January's daily average of 8.1. Certainly a trend we intend to continue. Utilizing a multi-layered enforcement approach, property-related crime is addressed by incorporating a strategy that builds upon community awareness. Through the use of a multitude of related resources, such as community affairs, crime prevention, and auxiliary police deployment programs, riders continue to be educated as to how best protect their belongings. Several of the tactics utilized by these resources are the use of DVD presentations playing on transit facility monitors, public service announcements, awareness handouts, and crime prevention initiatives. We're especially trying to promote the use of phone tracking applications, which, as you'll see shortly, can be quite helpful. The overall goal is to further educate and bring to the forefront the necessity of rider awareness. Along with the increased efforts to make passengers aware of these vulnerabilities, officers assigned to the NYPD Transit Bureau have stepped up their enforcement efforts. Year-to-date arrests from January 1st to March 31st have increased by 7.6%, which is an increase of 965, and fare evasion summonses have increased by 11.7%, or 2,116 additional summonses. During the week of March 5th, Transit Bureau officers effected 1,462 arrests and had 6,422 enforcement contacts, including 32 knives recovered during enforcement operations. This was done as part of our Operation Toolbox, which utilized every available officer and resource. Another result of the operation was 399 wanted persons apprehended. Team-led operations such as Toolbox will continue on a regular basis. Incidentally, during that week, there were 27 index crimes reported, one of our lowest crime weeks ever recorded. This strategy is a substantial step in the right direction for the Transit Bureau, which has made a positive impact on the lives of the riding public. Already in March, we have observed the results of this approach with the first monthly reduction in crime since December 2011, when we were down 2 crimes. The only other month in 2011 that reflected a reduction in crime was January, where we were down 1.6% that month. During the month of March, 47%, which is 53 of all of our grand larcenies, were electronic related. This was a significant decrease from February, when 57%, 72 of our grand larcenies were electronic related, and in January, 62%, 95 were electronic related. Looking at grand larcenies, March did show a spike in theft from sleeping passengers. There were 35 thefts from sleeping passengers during March 2012 compared to 24 in February and 19 in January. Our officers are well aware of this recent shift in crime and responded by making some excellent arrests, several of which are as follows. On March 31st, Thomas Coles was arrested on a 6 train at the Brooklyn Bridge Station for attempting to use a razor blade and cut open the pocket of a sleeping male. When the man awoke, the defendant attempted to flee and was apprehended by Transit District 2 anti-crime officer Michael Thomas. Coles had been previously arrested 34 times, once for murder in 1988, 3 for grand larceny, and 1 robbery arrest. Coles pled guilty to attempted grand larceny and received a 9-month sentence. On April 10th, police officer Michael DeSanto arrested Joe Outley for grand larceny that occurred on the 1 train at 66th Street. The victim fell asleep, and when he woke up, his cell phone was removed from him. Officers using Find My Phone application were able to track the phone to a building at 107th Street and Madison Avenue. They conducted a vertical patrol of the building and found the defendant sleeping on the 3rd floor hallway. A positive show-up was conducted, and the defendant was placed under arrest, and upon search incidental to the arrest, he was found to be in possession of the victim's iPhone. Outley was indicted for grand larceny and is in on $5,000 bail now. His next court date is May 15, 2012. Thomas Carter was arrested on March 18th by Detective Steve Martinez for jostling and criminal possession of a weapon, which was a razor, at West 57th Street and 7th Avenue in the month of March. The defendant was observed touching the pants pockets of sleeping passengers. Carter has 26 priors, 2 for robbery, 6 for grand larcenies. As of March 20th, he is on a parole warrant hold. And Juvian Rodriguez was arrested on April 7th by police officer Ricky Rudal after he was observed by the officers running his hands up and down the pockets of sleeping passengers on the 1 train at 34th Street and Penn Station. He was followed to the street where he met another defendant and exchanged a stolen iPhone for $40. The defendant was also in possession of 2 additional cell phones and 2 credit cards that did not belong to him. Rodriguez has 36 priors, with numerous arrests in transit and Penn Station. He was indicted for grand larceny, and he's in on $10,000 bail. His next court date is May 8, 2012. Our collaboration, as I believe Mr. Capelli mentioned, what we do with those who have been arrested, who we come into contact with, persistently in the subway system. Our collaboration with the Division of Parole continues with positive results. As year to date, there have been 39 individuals who have conditions, or what we call stipulations, attached to their parole status. Those conditions limit or ban the use of subways. When those parolees violate those stipulations, they can be returned to prison. This year, 2 parolees who violated the stipulations were returned to incarceration. Christopher Harris, who has numerous prior arrests, many of which involve stolen cell phones, was observed on a Manhattan train, and Nelson Nieves, who was on parole for robbery and later arrested for fare evasion, were both returned to jail. Arrests like those mentioned here today likely had a part in reversing the trend of the past few months. We thank the officers who made those arrests and the Transit Bureau commanding officers and the members who have appropriately deployed their resources to deal with these crimes. We'd also like to thank the MTA Board members, as this forum and the corresponding media attention helped us bring attention to these crimes, thereby better informing those who use our subways to remain alert. Thank you all, and I welcome any questions, comments, or suggestions.
Thank you, Joe. On the 4 train on the way down to this meeting, having nothing else to do, I counted 52 people in my car. 36 of them were using cell phones or tablets. You have your work cut out for you.
Wow.
Chuck?
Thank you.
Chief Fox, I have a high regard for both you and for your men and women who do a terrific job considering everything, as Mark has pointed out. I have a concern. These numbers continue to be higher in the aggregate in terms of crimes committed than they were last year. So, for example, we have 232 robberies as against 176 last year. My concern is not with the arrest statistics, but with the conviction statistics. You gave us 4 cases. Of the 4 cases, one fellow who had an arrest record in connection with a murder offense, and named Coles, and who had a rap sheet as long as your arm, received 9 months. Now, in the other cases, we have warrant holdings and the like. My concern is, as it has been for months, what is it that the district attorneys and the courts are doing? If they are not assisting us in the attempt to incarcerate this garbage and put them in the can, then they are causing, or at least assisting, in the crime rate in the subways. And my point, Mr. Chairman, is the following. I have asked repeatedly if we can, in some fashion, communicate with the district attorneys to have them pay attention to this. In the Giuliani administration, there was proven that the squeegee people inevitably led to other crimes. Previously, we had a special drug prosecutor. Maybe the answer is if the DAs do not do their jobs, then perhaps it's time for the governor to appoint a special prosecutor on a one-year basis to prosecute these transit crimes and make it clear to those people who like to engage in that crime does not necessarily have to pay.
You want to try and answer that?
Well, Chuck, I have in fact spoken to all 5 of the district attorneys about this, and I'll be meeting with Commissioner Kelly on Wednesday, where we will be discussing how to jointly work with the district attorneys on this issue.
Terrific.
As a former assistant district attorney, if you need my help, let me know. Any more questions for Joe? Back to you, Tom.
Finance report. Preliminary February 2012 fare box revenue was $291.5 million, a half a million above budget. Year-to-date fare box revenue was $582.9 million, 1.4 or 2% below budget. Average non-student fare in February 2012 was $1.64. In constant $1996, the average fare fell from $1.38 in 1996 to $1.09 in 2012. Preliminary February 2012 operating expenses before depreciation and OPEB were below budget by $3.7 million, or 0.8%. Labor expenses exceeded budget by $2.7 million, due mostly to higher overtime expenses caused by additional requirements for signals inspection and maintenance, bus maintenance, and coverage due to low employee availability. Non-labor expenses were less than budget by $6.4 million, or 4.6%, due largely to the favorable timing of several expenses and paratransit underruns, partly offset by higher electric power prices. Year-to-date, operating expenses exceeded budget by 1.1%, or 1.1 million, or 0.1%. Ridership. February 2012 ridership totaled 187.1 million, a 0.5% above budget. Year-to-date ridership was 373.8 million, 0.2% below budget. February 2012 ridership benefited from unseasonably warm, dry weather. February 2012 average weekday subway ridership was 5.4 million, an increase of 2.4% from February 2011. This was the highest average weekday subway ridership of any February in over 45 years. February 2012 average weekday local bus ridership was 2.1 million, an increase of 3.3% from February 2011, due to both low ridership from the winter weather in February 2011 and the extremely favorable weather in February 2012. The average weekday express bus ridership for the month was 44,000, an increase of 5% from February 2011. And February 2012 average weekday paratransit ridership was 31,000, an increase of 10.2% from February 2011. An early look at preliminary March 2012 financial results. Total fare box revenue was $1 million above budget, and preliminary operating expenses were favorable to budget by $13.2 million, or 2.7%, due primarily to the favorable timing of several non-labor expenses that are under review and paratransit service contract underruns. That completes the financial report.
Questions for Tom? Okay, over to you, Fred. Where are you? There you are.
Good morning. Looking at capital program results, commitments for the month of February total $260 million, including installation of new VHF radio base station equipment to replace our legacy subway train radio, communication system equipment, a project to provide full ADA accessibility at the Hunts Point Avenue station on the Pelham No. 6 line in Lower Bronx, purchase and installation of new sprinkler systems at 5 employee facilities to upgrade the fire protection, and rehabilitation of vents and gratings at 7 stations in Manhattan and Brooklyn. On the completion side, total of $33 million for the month, including providing access and access control and intrusion detection at 229 of our communication rooms, purchase and installation of HVAC at 5 more communication rooms. That's an ongoing effort, and the replacement of 4 mainline track switches on the Jamaica line as part of our in-house track program. Also worth noting for the month, the closure of the Court Square Station, where we redecked the platform over the course of 11 weeks, was successfully completed on time and opened up Monday morning, April 2nd. Also, the southbound platform on 4th and 9th on the F line was completed that same weekend and opened up for local service continuing south on the F line.
Both of them look great. Well done.
Thank you.
Questions for Fred Smith? All right, who's doing procurements, Tom?
Steve Luchacki.
Good morning.
Okay.
The procurement package this month, which presents both New York City Transit and MTA procurements, includes 7 actions totaling $40.9 million in expenditures. I would like to highlight 2 competitive procurements for MTA. The first is a modification for $21.1 million to HLH7 to extend the contract by 25 months and provide additional consultant construction management services for the number 7 subway line extension project. The second is a modification to add $18 million to the allowance for transportation and disposal of spoils for the construction of the 96th Street station.
What's a spoil?
Muck.
Muck? Oh, okay. I understand that. Any questions for Steve?
Of course, on page 5.7, it should say Fort Hamilton Parkway Station, not Fort Hamilton Street Station. But
thank heavens for you, Andrew. We'll amend the book accordingly. Any questions on the procurements?
Yes.
Chuck?
Page 5.13. If I understand correctly from the penultimate paragraph, there were negotiations with the contractor and no agreement. Why was this not then let out for some form of RFP or bidding or the like?
This is Pacone?
Yep.
In this particular instance, we are so far advanced with the particular project that we wanted to continue to move forward with the repairs.
And so even though we couldn't agree on the price, we're going to move forward with this?
Yes. And with the hopes that either A, and I believe that we are going to reach agreement on this particular issue.
Well, it seems to me that either we reach agreement or we ban Pacone from any further work with the system. You can't do this stuff.
Well, we were in negotiations, and quite honestly, we were going back and forth on the price. That's not unusual, but in this particular case, we decided to direct the contractor to continue to do the work so as not to impact further on the contract.
If I can add something, this is a typical contract provision that we have, where if we require a change and we can't agree on a price, we direct the work to be done if it's required, and then there's a dispute resolution mechanism to arrive at the final price.
The traditional dispute resolution system that you have used was the chief engineer arbitrating. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is that going to be used here?
If they so choose to put in a claim. This is not atypical. We're very late in this construction job. We're months away from completion. There's discussions going back with respect to delays that have been incurred over the life of the project. It's not unusual for a contractor when we're issuing an AWO late in a project to bring up those issues to make the best case on their behalf to justify delays that have been incurred, and that should be worked out. But I gave the authority for the work to proceed to complete the project. I have the authority to do that as the chief engineer. If they do not agree with my direction, then they have every right to claim it and file in a formal claim.
And are you doing so?
We believe that we'll be able to reach agreement without having to initiate a dispute. One of the other issues is that the contractor was physically mobilized in that particular area.
That's correct.
And the notion of getting another contractor, not only would it result in significant delay, but would also mean that the contractor would have to demobilize, and then we'd have to have another contractor come in and mobilize. So there's certain savings associated with moving forward in this particular direction under active contracts.
Let me take you then back to 5.9. In that case, you have contracts that were let in 2006. And what we are seemingly doing here is modifying the 2006 contracts to provide additional work, correct?
Correct.
Why is it that we cannot seek competition in this area?
Well, Aspect is a non-competitive procurement in that regard. They're the only ones that can do this particular work. And this is actually sort of a good story where what we're doing is we're not having this particular contract provide the hardware. We're going to be providing the hardware ourselves, and our technology folks will actually maintain the hardware afterwards. We expect that we'll probably get about a 6 to 7 year useful life of the new hardware. So we're actually saving money by having this particular contractor who's already thoroughly familiar with the particular software and the actual end product continue the work.
Let me make a suggestion to you, if you can do so in the future. If you could put that kind of information into the summary, it would spare everybody being burdened with my questions.
I'll try and do that.
Any further questions or cross-examination? Everyone in favor of the procurements, kindly vote aye. Any opposed? All right, the procurements carry. Service changes.
In Section 6 of the agenda, we are informing the committee of bus schedule service changes planned for implementation in July of this year. Routine bus schedule changes include adjustments based on ridership demand to comply with board-approved guidelines. Accordingly, we are proposing 21 schedule changes on 17 routes, and these adjustments are anticipated to be cost neutral.
Do you want to talk about these in the bus committee or in this committee? 15 of these are service cuts. 6 of these are service additions. How can that be considered cost neutral? To me, this looks like, every department was said you got to cut so much, and this is what...
These aren't driven by an agenda to say we need to cut service. The board-adopted guidelines have specific criteria under which when we add service based on ridership, as taken by traffic checks, as well as reductions in service when ridership goes down. So the genesis for this isn't to cut, it's to match demand to, match service to demand. So
ask.
But Peter's here to be able to answer.
If these are judged once a year, these routes, and determined that, ridership has diminished or gained, how is that an accurate reflection of what should probably be judged quarterly? Ridership fluctuates for various reasons, weather reasons, let me just finish 1 second. You've got arguably one of the busiest bus lines in the borough of Brooklyn listed here, the B41. You've got a major Manhattan crosstown route that's going to every 20 minutes, the M23. I'm aghast to think that those have suffered ridership declines, those two routes, unless it's, I know it's just certain span of service. I know you're talking about Sunday mornings or Saturday mornings or whatever it is, but I'm just wondering how much these kinds of seasonal adjustments drive the ongoing boardings of buses. In other words, which came first, the service cuts or the rider decline? Are these driving further rider declines? Is that being looked at? Like, for instance, you have about 6 or 7 routes this time. Will those routes be looked at in less than a year's time to see what the impact has been?
We actually look at weekday routes every other year and weekends every 4 years. So this, to some extent, is reflecting declines that have already happened. Going back to your first question, in terms of the number of routes up or down versus the dollar value, the big cost drivers are a weekday, plus or minus. We only, in this case, had 3 weekday routes in the cycle. 2 of them were up significantly, one in Brooklyn, one in the Bronx, and there was another in Brooklyn that was down a bit. Basically, it's whatever, we go through the entire bus system over the course of a 2-year period, looking at those routes, and based on the ridership, when we look at it, we adjust. I should point out, express buses we do every year, so that is once a year.
But in the case of, I think, Peter, you said that weekends are looked at every other year, something like that?
Every 4 years.
Every 4 years?
Yes.
So that means that should this have been just a momentary blip on the radar and that some of those routes probably didn't deserve this cut, they will be for another 4 years? And
Not necessarily. If we get a tremendous amount of complaints about oversubscription of a service, we will accelerate when that route will be looked at. Peter?
That's correct. And on weekends and off-peaks, the guideline is a seat for every passenger. So there may be a few standees that would be over guidelines. People are not going to be left behind on these routes. I should point out, when you talked about going from 15 to 20 minutes, that was early Sunday morning. We're currently at less than 70% of a seated load, so we're going to 90%. So there is some cushion. on those. On the peak hour ones are the ones where conceivably, if it gets significantly crowded, buses could be passing people up. We would get reports on that, and we do go out when we hear reports or when we look at MetroCard data and see that ridership, farebox ridership is changing significantly. We will go out and look at a bus sooner than the cycle.
I'm not saying that you shouldn't be free to do these things where it's warranted. I'm just saying, is that level of frequency of looking at these routes the right level?
Well, an awful lot of thought goes into the application of the guidelines because, as we said before, they are not so rigid nor are they applied so fast that it's a science. It's a combination of an art and a science. And we are extremely sensitive on the bus side of the house that as you reduce service, it could be a self-fulfilling prophecy and you cut more service. So what may be worthwhile is for us to take you through a cycle and we can show you what goes on inside, because there are a lot of times we will err on the side of saying, let's wait another pass to see whether or not the ridership is actually dropping before we cut. Now, having said that, we've even had a question like, should we just suspend for a while the application of the service guidelines? But what will happen over time is you get so out of kilter with over-service on some routes and under-service on other routes that you don't even have a planning structure in place in order to effectually match service with demand.
I appreciate that, Tom.
But as I've said at other meetings, I've never been in this place before where the constraints in terms of the revenues coming in have forced us to take very, very hard looks at the bus service. But in some cases, some of these services really do warrant reductions because the ridership isn't there. But we ought to take you through a cycle and bring you in and show it to you.
I'd like that. The other problem with doing it as infrequently as Mr. Caffiero just mentioned is that in 3 years or less, you could have a major traffic generator having been constructed in a particular place.
Generally what happens on that front, though, we will see it. First of all, bus supervision on the street, Darrell Eric's people will say we're starting to see, the bus operators ourselves tell us that, but the community at large tells us. And more often than not, we will accelerate looking at a route when ridership is increased, and we will put the service out there.
Right. I mean, when we see the generators going up, we follow that, and we do go out and look after the fact. We certainly, many of the routes that were affected by the service changes 2 years ago, these checks have all been done after that fact, so we're looking at that. In the case, again, we have some long-term trends, particularly in Manhattan, that have been going on for over a decade. And if we'd all love to see those turn around, and we will respond when they do. But in the meantime, we have to reallocate the resources to the routes that are growing, and there are routes that are growing that we need to provide the service on.
Let me first ask this question. How do you measure that the ridership has declined? Do you look at the buses? Do you measure how many people are on the buses? Or do you just look at the fare box?
Well, we start with looking at the fare box, and that information we get monthly, and you see the summaries every month, and we look at that to see if there's trends. Then we have traffic checking team of employees that go out and actually count riders on buses, either along the entire bus route or for the larger routes at the heaviest points. That we look at how many people are on the bus. We do that several times. If there's service missing, we factor that in. If there's a heavily disrupted day, we'll go out and do the count again. So we do take into account. We'd love to have a count every day, but right now the resources that we have, that's how we get that information.
One of the things we do check, I'd like to interrupt, Chuck. One of the things we do check is we do get feedback, either based on bus operators or others, that some routes may have a higher fare evasion factor than another. And if, for example, the lead-in was a reduction in fare revenue, but somebody's saying to us there may be high fare evasion there, we will then do a check on that particular route. So we don't want to just solely rely on the fare box revenue in and of itself.
And that was the point I wanted to make. You can't rely on the fare box entirely because there is, according to everything I hear, a significant amount of fare evasion going on, and it penalizes the public. We heard at this morning's Metro North meeting that there was now proof positive, at least as to trains, that when you eliminate or reduce service, it's awfully hard to get it back. And that's a point that Tom has previously made. all I keep seeing are reduction, reduction, reduction. And it troubles me because it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. My question to you is, if you have a reduction that you have measured, not just by the fare box, but by looking in the bus, and instead of seeing 30, 40, 50 people on the bus, you see 10 or 11 or 12, have you given any consideration to using smaller buses and providing service? The people in Woodlawn in the Bronx have no weekend service to rely upon.
I believe Darrell's answered that question, but I'll answer it again. Two of the determining factors as to whether or not you can use a small bus is, do you have a facility? First of all, do you have a number in the fleet, and we don't. The second issue, do you have facilities to be able to maintain them? And the third issue is the issue of the disparity. Usually you pay a lower wage rate for the bus operators. But the first two items are ones that limit us. And for the most part, for the entire time I've been here, we have a route structure that really supports the need for a 40-foot bus or longer.
And yet, there are loads of routes in the outer boroughs, and everybody keeps focusing on Manhattan. I don't. In the outer boroughs, there are loads of routes where there are less people. And they can, pardon me?
No, I said no one's perfect. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry, Kevin. Keep going.
We've yet to see a model that can support. It's a step function. You can't just put one route out there with a small bus, because you don't. You have to reach a critical mass in the number of buses you have in a depot to be able to support it.
Tom,
but we continually look at it.
Tom, let me ask you this question. Could somebody start to look at a pilot project to test these out? They work in other major cities. They provide service when you only need 4 or 5 people on a bus that goes at night, or crosstown during the middle of the day in Manhattan, or in Woodlawn or other places in Queens.
And the systems that I've worked at have utilized them. It's been a totally different demographic in what would be the equivalent of an outer borough, but it's not really the equivalent because the density is much lower. They're much lower population residential neighborhoods. But also there's already a fleet with smaller buses existing. But we can take a look at it.
Would you do this, please? Take a look at it. See if it works. See what it would cost. Because the two factors that you have pointed out as primary ones, namely, do we have a depot that can take care of maintenance and do we have a fleet, are both a question of allocation of resources. And my point to you is, it may well be, since we're in the service business, that our resources can be allocated to provide that kind of service in these places. In that event, you don't need to have these kind of service reductions. Draconian ones, in my view. By the way, my last question is, did these go by the community boards?
Correct. We notify the community boards and
When?
elected officials simultaneously to notifying you.
That's last Friday. And you expect them to have heard by now? This is, Mr. Chairman, last time I raised this subject, you promised me that you would arrange to make sure that the community boards are advised promptly. Now he's telling you, last Friday, the community boards in New York City heard about this, and you expect them to comment today.
Well, as a former community board chairman, you have my sympathies
That's
here.
exactly
We're going to work on that one.
I would
find
like to
this
address the issue.
absolutely outrageous. I really do.
I'd like to address the issue of a pilot project at a time in which we are under severe financial stress, and a time in which we're also evaluating, we're a few months away from public discussions at this board about a fare increase. Once we get our financial house in order, we could think about a pilot. But at this point in time, the concept of short buses is one that's perilous. And I've dealt with the elected officials, specifically up in Woodlawn, none of whom have the same concerns that you have. And so, in following up, I'm not sure I understand the need for small buses at this time.
Mr. Chairman, I understand the economic plight, and I understand the need to get our financial house in order. What I'm asking now is that we take a look at whether or not that is even feasible. And the reason I comment on Woodlawn is that the elected officials bombard me with it.
Well, I have just the opposite experience. When I hear your comments, I talk to them directly, and they're not consistent.
I suggest Oliver Coppell be the person you might want to talk to. He's the person who complained to me about it, the councilman.
I'll do that. I've talked to the assembly member and the state senator over the over the city council member who provides absolutely no funding to us.
All right, folks, if there's any more questions for service changes, hearing none, we will now turn to the hardest job in the MTA, the chairman of the head of Capital Construction, Michael Haradnashanu, who is now commonly referred to in the world by the ominous moniker Dr. H. Dr. H, anything to tell us?
Sounds bad. Like a movie. Well, I'm just going to just briefly speak about some of the projects, and then I would like to address the number 7 unfortunate accident. Fulton Transit, not much to report. The work is continuing, it's on schedule, and is moving along. Second Avenue line, and this is actually the tunneling contract going from 92nd to 63rd has been completed, and we are now actually closed it out, the substantial completion. There is a tremendous amount of work going on at 96th Street. Again, right now they're forecasting basically to be pretty much on time. That will depend on the advances that they are having with the secant piles as well as the slurry walls. Regarding 72nd Street Cavern, 75% of the tunneling of the excavation in the cavern is by now behind us, and we expect to complete the work in late May, beginning of June. So the majority of the excavation in the cavern will be done, and additional excavation and blasting is going to occur at the ancillary buildings where we are we are digging down. The 86th Street cavern mining, the new type mucking structures are pretty much in place. There's work still to be done. We started about a week ago what we refer to as test blasting, just to start going down, and we're moving along. Right now we're calibrating. We're looking to make sure that we're not going to generate again the same uproar that every time we blast we generate. So we're trying to make sure that we're doing the right thing. At 63rd Street, in effect, the structural steel work continues, and things are moving accordingly. The 96th Street Station structure system and finishes, the current bid opening date is April 24th. So just in basically today, it's tomorrow, right? I would like to actually shift for a moment to the number 7. Okay, that this is really something that it's quite troublesome. Can you hold just one moment, Bogdan? We did have a worker that passed away as a result of the crane accident, Michael Zimmermeyer, and just wanted to observe a moment of silence. Okay. We're just gonna just give you some facts regarding that. At approximately 7:20 p.m. on Tuesday, the boom that is operated by Younghurst. This is the site, 34th Street, 33rd, 11th Avenue. The boom, you can see it at the top there. This is the type of equipment that will be using. At the time of the accident, the boom was not loaded, and it was at 7:20 p.m. Mr. Zimmermeyer happened to be on site at that particular time, and when that boom actually collapsed across the opening, he was pinned down. The site was therefore secured and by NYPD. DOB was on site, and at this point DOB is actually doing an ongoing investigation on the reasons for the collapse. And we'll report as these things are becoming available. Regarding the work on site, I am actually the work is proceeding well. Site L, that it's at 41st Street and Dyer. We expect to have the final completion of the building is on target for August 2012. The Site K, that is 35th to 37 and 11th Avenue. Again, the work is proceeding slightly ahead of schedule and will be done there beginning of next year. Potentially, if we're a little early, will be the end of this year. The Site P, we had qualification hearings for the apparent low bidder, Picone, and we expect to proceed to award in June the contract. This is the part of the project that will be completed in 2015 and is really a secondary entry point to the station. Site J, the currently work is proceeding. The contractor is reporting being behind schedule at this point, and we're analyzing various mitigation strategies, and we're considering various ways to make sure that he can stick with their schedule as originally projected. The system and finishes contract is ongoing. The contractor has finished approximately 40% of the dock benches in the tunnels, and actually the welding of the rail that actually it takes place in Linden Yards in Brooklyn has been completed. So they're doing it off-site and then transporting it and will be installed. That's about it for number 7.
Fred?
Mr. Chairman, in the immediate aftermath of that very tragic accident on the 7 extension line, it was reported that Speaker of the City Council, among others, had suggested that if the MTA were only bound by city rules, this might not have happened. It is my understanding that that we are. Is my understanding incorrect?
It's partially correct. We follow city rules as far as the licensing of the various different crane operators and following through on all of that. For the most part, we don't follow their newest rules to a T. Is that not correct?
As far as I know, we followed whatever rules they had in place. That's my understanding.
Okay, I stand corrected, and that was a discussion that I actually had with the Speaker's chief of staff prior to his announcement, her announcement.
So the Department of Buildings does not apply one set of rules in this kind of activity to us, and
we believe it's the same.
Thank you.
It's times like this when all of us appreciate everybody who works for capital construction, whether they're our personnel or the men and women that work for our contractors and subcontractors. It's sometimes a perilous job to enter into construction, and you know how much we appreciate everything that our people do and all the people that work for our subcontractors and our contractors. Chuck?
Mr. Chairman, just a footnote to Borough President Ferrer's question. Am I not correct that as a state agency, we are not legally obligated to follow the city rules, and that we do so as a matter of comity only? Isn't that correct?
I'm not sure why we follow them at all, to give any specific reason. Do you?
As my understanding goes, these are different. I mean, in general, the specifications, construction specs, could be different. But in terms of compliance with the regulations, I think we're fully complying. That means the contractor.
Our general counsel from New York City Transit's here because across a pretty broad swath of different aspects of regulations that the city has, we comply with. But I'll let you know, not just construction, but Marty?
Turn it on.
It's not on.
Marty, come sit at the table. Come sit at the table where the microphone is. We know they work.
Is that better?
Yes.
The comment was correct. As a public authority of the state, MTA, NYCT, and other MTA agencies are largely exempt from municipal regulation. But that doesn't preclude us, as a matter of comity or otherwise, from following that regulation.
It's been raised time and again, going back to the construction of the World Trade Center in my misbegotten youth. The point I make is that we do so out of an abundance of caution to maximize safety considerations, and that was a cheap shot by the Speaker.
Okay. On any other questions for Michael? Anything left to do in our meeting, Tom?
Nope. Back on time.
Anybody else? We caught up to our time. How about that? And if no one has any new business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Thank you all very much. Thank you, Joe.